Welcome to the road to growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road to Growth listeners. Today, I have a person that has many titles. One of the titles I'm probably going to say his last name because that's going to be very difficult. I'm going to say Dr. Steve. He's the founder of TopDog Learning Group. He's also the gay leader dude. Did I say that right? Gay leader? I didn't say that right. It doesn't feel right. Did I say that right?
It's weird. I'm hearing echo.
No, I wonder if you have the live feed going on too.
It's weird. I'm hearing echo. Yeah, hold on one second.
Yeah, this is why we love to go live right there. I mean, live in person, and probably with a lot of business leaders, they have to deal with being live on a daily basis and be careful of the words they use. I mean, this is being live right here. So anything you say right now, someone could be watching this 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. Oh, now I think we lost the sound for you now.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Okay. But yeah, being live. So, well, thank you, Steve, for being here today.
Yeah, no, thank you, Vinny. Happy to be here.
So, a question that I asked basically all the people in the kind of similar field that you are, coaches, consultants, and I did get a flack for this on a previous episode where I lumped those two in together. Yet I'm still going to do it. Is how would you separate yourself from those people in this sector, coaches, consultants, people like that?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I've been in this space for about going on 30 years. So I started in kindergarten, and but no, it's almost been about 30 years. And I kind of take a step back and say, well, at its core, I'm a communications expert. I help people either communicate with their team members. I help them communicate with their clients or their vendors or whomever. So at the core, it's building relationships and communicating, and that's kind of the general way I would kind of identify myself.
This is a question that kind of pops in my head. I mean, especially I think with the quote unquote, I don't know, you say cancel culture, you see basically kind of things like that out there. Is there a way to coach people of putting videos out there, like for leaders, right? Of saying that this is the content that we're going to basically be releasing over the next 5-10 years, or is it always assessing the content you're putting out there, I guess, every couple of years to see if maybe a word becomes derogatory or the way you talk to people changes? Because it seems like that's changing kind of on a frequent basis. So how's that work?
Yeah, no, I think if we're going to be smart leaders, we should always be revisiting any of our assets that we have out there, whether it be in print, whether it be video, whatever, because, what somebody published as, say, a commercial back in the 70s is probably going to look a little bit different in the 2020s and such. So I think if we're approaching business and just approaching leadership and communication right, we should be revisiting those assets, if you will, and make sure that they're both still saying the same message that we want it to and the correct intent, and two, making sure that through the lens or the context of today's audience and who's listening to that.
Fair enough. I mean, well, let's rewind to a young Steve. I mean, who was young Steve? Was he kind of helping other people get to where they needed to get to? Was he life of the party? Who was the young Steve?
Young Steve was a very unathletic, more rounded kid who tried every sport and failed pretty much at all of them, but still tried. And I think I was pretty fortunate with my upbringing. Parents are awesome, still together to this day. Looking at I youngest of three siblings, I should say, and I had a fairly good middle class kind of blue collar upbringing in the suburbs of Philadelphia. But all of that really contributed to how I look at the world in that glass half full kind of perspective. So, we all have our bad days, and we all have there's that kid's book, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Well, we all have those, but I think young Steve learned very early on to take a look at how to look at the glass a little more half full than half empty.
where did that mindset come from? Was it, I mean, nature, nurture, family? Kind of, I mean, where did that come from?
I think it's a couple different things. The first is, my parents were pretty positive folks. My dad is and still is. He can tell jokes for like hours and hours, and so kind of that joy in the household kind of permeated, at least for me, both during the childhood as well as well beyond, and really helping people be relaxed and leverage humor more as a tool to bring joy and kindness and not be cruel.
Mm. And you talk well-rounded in sports. What kind of sports did you play?
No, I was a well-rounded kid.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you're going for a heavier set or well-rounded. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt. He said a lot of sports, so I'm gonna say.
No, I was a little portly child. I found my inner jock in my 20s.
Okay.
But I tried everything. Actually, I was fairly good at tennis, even though I was a little heavy kid. But as I became an adult, I really found myself playing a lot of softball. And some other sports as well, team sports. And I finally had to retire from my softball days about 3 years ago. Small womp.
So you're in young kid, a little heavier set. What were your aspirations kind of going in the future? Was it being a coach? Was it just being in the corporate world? Did you have any kind of aspirations kind of growing up?
I wanted to be a teacher. And what's kind of funny, and I'm from a family of teachers, and I was accepted to my undergrad as a math educator because I kind of liked math and I was good at math. And before I got on campus, I used to do theater and stuff as a kid. And one of my friends, she was a year ahead of me. She came back for break, and I'm like, "Oh, how's college?" And she's like, "It's great. I'm a speech communication major." I'm like, "What the heck is that?" And she kind of told me, I'm like, "Wow, that sounds a little bit more like me." So I switched majors before I ever got set foot on campus. But it's kind of interesting because if I look at full circle, I am an educator. I work with adult education with corporations and large not-for-profits. So I'm like this weird anomaly of an educator, but I guess I still did what I wanted to do when I was, in second grade.
You're go to college. After college, did you get directly into leadership coaching, or what was the process there?
I found myself working at several organizations. My dream during undergrad was to work for Disney. And so, I grew up outside of Philly and didn't have a job, but I packed up my little Ford Escort, was going to live with a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend in Orlando, came down, unpacked what I could fit in my car, went to Walt Disney World, and I got a job. It wasn't the most glamorous job. It was at the time, it was the Central Reservations Office. So this is pre-internet, friends who are listening and watching. So if you wanted to make a Disney vacation, you had to call 407-W-Disney. And me or 499 other folks would answer that call. And we all had unique names. So we had a phony name in true Disney fashion. So I was Ethan. I was not Steven, because there was already a Steven, who worked there somewhere. And so I did that job for about 6 months. It was not the best fit for me, but it was a great exposure to kind of getting into the Disney and the corporate world. But I had a series of 3 really bad things happen to me, all within 2 days of each other. I was sleeping on a futon because I didn't have any furniture just yet. And I woke up one morning and it was one of those futons that's like basically just a sponge. It's kind of like you flip it up and you're on the floor. So I rolled over and I hear this squish. And I'm like, what the heck was that? And it turns out our toilet blew up during the night. So the entire apartment was flooded. Well, of course, I'm sleeping on a sponge and didn't realize it. So there's one. And then I open up the front, go to my roommate, like, Jeff, what's going on? And I open up the front door just to see. And it turns out my mountain bike, which is like the only possession I had, was stolen. I'm like, strike 2. And then so a couple days later, I'm like, well, you know what? I need a bed. And so I found like a classified ads for a bed. I went to go get it and I got into a near fatal car accident. I'm like, okay, clearly God, universe, Buddha, Allah, insert whoever here is like, Steve, get the heck out of Orlando. You're not supposed to be here. So moved back up to Philly in with the folks. And ironically, that was the time when I started to figure my authentic self out and figure out, like, wait a minute, maybe I don't like girls. Maybe I'm really more into dudes. And which was a bad timing because now I'm living with mom and dad and I'm in my 20s. I'm like, oh man, this is not good. So that progressed. I was there for about a year. And then I got a job offer, which happened to be in Orlando. And I didn't want the job, but I came for the interview thinking, I can go see my friends in Orlando. That's cool. And it was an amazing software company. It's the mid 90s. And I was applying for grad school. And I said, I'll put that on the back burner and try this job. And so I moved back down to Orlando for time number 2, knowing my authentic self. It was a completely different experience. It was really fun. And then I ended up staying at this, and this is the first time I got into the training to kind of roundabout answer your question. I was doing software training, but I was still working with adults and helping them learn things and strategically use this tool and all that good stuff. And then the company got bought and things were kind of getting a little weird. So I said, I'm going to pick up that grad school thing again. So I went to Ohio State for my master's degree in educational policy and leadership. So it's where the leadership thing starts coming in. And then I applied for jobs in DC, in Chicago. And I'm like, I like the weather in Orlando. What the heck? Got the job in Orlando, moved back for a third time. My friends are now calling me Boomerang because they're like, my goodness, we throw you away. You keep coming back. I'm like, I'm sorry. And the coolest part, though, is I moved back on a Monday. Friday, I met who's now my husband, 23 for 23 years or so. So, I was meant to be in Orlando, just my timing was never right. And I spent time in a couple different corporations before going out on my own. I did go back to Disney, but in a much different capacity. I was an internal leadership consultant with the cruise line, which was a sweet gig, I have to say. I worked at IBM for a while as an external consultant. I was a professor for like a hot minute at a couple of universities, including here at the University of Central Florida. And then I took my part-time side hustle with TopDog Learning Group, which we technically started in 2002. I took it as my full-time gig in 2008, which was just awesome timing from a economy perspective. But knock on wood, that's what I've been doing full-time ever since.
So in 2008, that's when you started TopDog Learning?
It's when I took it full-time. So my friend Ruth and I started it while we were still at Disney because she approached me. She's like, we should do a job. I'm like, or do a business. I'm like, well, we have jobs, we work for Disney. She's like, no, let's just hear me out. And so we went to our boss at Disney and we told her the deal. We're going to do this consulting thing, training. She's like, fantastic. Thank you for coming. Don't use Disney time. Don't use Disney stuff. Good luck. And so we did a couple of projects here and there. It wasn't anything crazy, but the cool thing was we set up the business infrastructure. So then flash forward to late 2007, I'm kind of in between jobs. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I'm like, you know what? I have the structure. Let's make it a full-time gig and see what happens. And knock on wood, that's what I've been doing.
What was original? Because you talk about in your video on your website, kind of equality. And I think a lot of the stuff you have equality there. I mean, did it originally come as kind of equality and coaching and kind of hand in hand, or what was the original vision of it?
TopDog was really focused on soft skills for leaders. And we define leader as anyone with influence within the business. And that's pretty much everybody. So it's really thinking about those soft skills things. But both Ruth and I had a very strong background and passion for diversity and inclusion. And so as the years progressed, that line became much more blurred in a great way. And if you now look at the times we're in, if you're an inclusive leader, you're going to be a heck of a lot more successful than if you're one that's more exclusionary. And so I like to say that we evolved and merged into really fostering inclusive leaders and creating that sense of belonging within the workplace.
How do you think, and I know it's part-time before you, I don't know if the right word, but before you opened up, I guess. Yeah. How did the vision, I guess, change, or the way you looked at that business change from pre, I guess, to like kind of post?
It's kind of still the same, quite honestly. Okay. What we do today, what I've been doing with clients over the years is we focus on cultivating leadership talent. Now, the approach is slightly different. Of course, it better be, or else we're not really good consultants if we haven't evolved with the times. But really helping leaders, mostly within the corporate context or large not-for-profits, really help them think through how they can approach their leadership how they can approach leading their teams or their projects or whatever it is within the workplace, and leverage both their own personal strengths as well as expose them to some other strategies, tools, ideas to help them be even more effective with the leadership at hand.
Has there been a time, I mean, for your own self, where you were part of a company, a corporation, an entity where you kind of wish that they had your services because you maybe weren't treated, I guess, the best?
Yeah, this is where it's a combination of really knowing leadership and also knowing like organizational development and efficiencies. And so I drive my husband crazy sometimes when we're like at the airport and TSA line. I'm like, oh, this is so inefficient. Oh, these people have no people skills, and not to generalize, of course, from my TSA friends listening, but sometimes you see these inefficiencies or these lack of empathy. From a leadership perspective, I was actually coaching a client the other day, which of course I won't share her name, but she was sharing how her boss was treating her, and I'm like, my goodness, that's leadership malpractice. And so you do the best you can do, but you also know that sometimes even the most forward-thinking organizations, there's always going to be those individuals who just aren't with the program and have somehow skated by their whole career and are committing leadership malpractice on a daily basis, and we have to kind of figure that out.
Well, I mean, so I think you relay that you've seen it from kind of the outside, where you with your clients, I guess, or TSA, you see these situations. And I mean, I jump back to, it seems like you've had a lot of different hats of like different careers. Was there ever time where you actually left a company because you didn't find out that it was a good fit for yourself? Is that kind of why jumping around, or what were the reasons behind for your own jumping around?
For my own personal career path, a lot of it's been just circumstantial. Sometimes it would be I was working with a software company and loved the job. Sales stunk and they downsized, 28% of the population of the company at one point. Like, oh, okay, that's it. Other times it was, a limited contract. When I was a professor, actually it was supposed to be a 5-year full-time visiting thing. I just got my doctorate and I'm like, well, let's see if this academic thing works out for me. And the first week I was through new faculty orientation, we had all these hurricanes roar through Central Florida. And so my grant was state funded. And so my dean pulls me and she's like, Steve, I have to preface this. I love you. I worked in the College of Education, but I was the corporate educator. Everyone else was like K through 12. And she's like, I love it's a different perspective. It really shines a different career path that some of our teachers can take. Yeah, that 5-year grant, we get you for one more semester. I'm like, oh, okay. So there's that. And then with my IBM time, which I absolutely loved, I just found myself on and for those who aren't watching, I'm doing bunny ears, quote unquote, 3-week project in San Francisco. I'm like, 3 weeks. All right. I can commute there Monday and come back on Fridays and all that good stuff. Well, 3 weeks turned into 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. By month number 10, I went to my boss and said, I can't do this anymore. This is physically exhausting. And there's smarter people in LA who can do the commute up. I was leading a team in change management. And if you know anything about a matrix organization where you have like 4 bosses, in any different way, and it depends on like the subject matter expertise you have, the industry you're in, and then the project you're on. It's all these little hats that are kind of leading your life around. And the one gentleman who was in part of the leadership he liked me, and he's like, no, you're doing a great job. I said, but there'll be other people who do great jobs that you can find. Trust me. And he wouldn't release me for the project. So I said, I released myself. So there's a good example of kind of knowing that as much as I love the role, the situation wasn't really feeding my soul. And so I kind of left. It's funny though, because I left on good terms in general. And so IBM was always my plan B because I truly love the company. So I always say if TopDog ever fails, I'll go back to being an IBMer. And 14 years later, that hasn't happened yet.
Was there ever a moment where you were close to looking at plan B more seriously?
April 2020.
Okay.
So typically how it works is we have, we're like the certified leadership vendor for several large organizations. The global enterprises, we focus on like the North American stuff. And so typically we sell all of our major on-site client work by February of the year. And so I know where me and my top doggers are physically going to travel to for the entire year. It's kind of very nice because I can add on vacations and do all that stuff. Well, of course, we all know what happened in March 2020. And it took a couple weeks till people were starting to figure things out. And then all my clients said, Steve, we don't want you or your team anywhere near our campus. So we're going to cancel all training for the year. And that was everything. I lost every bit of business I had scheduled, much like I know a lot of people did. And so then I'm like, well, crap. At the time I'm turning 50. I can't like build a business completely off the ground again. And so I did start to figure things out, and knock on wood. My doctorate's in instructional technology and distance education. So I was doing distance ed and Zooming before it was wicked cool during a pandemic. But it was never really a big part of our business, just because, just the way things worked out. So I was able, and I don't like the word pivot because it's so overused, but we did. We turned all of our training programs into online experiences. I went to all the clients and said, look, let us turn that thing that we used to do for 2 days or 3 days into something else. And I started poking them around June when we knew this isn't going away after like a couple weeks. And they're like, no, we're not ready. You're not ready. September, all 4 of the clients were like, yeah, can you and your team make that stuff online now? We're like, of course we can. And that's what we've been doing all year. And quite frankly, this is the best year we've ever had in the 14 years that we've existed. So it definitely glass half full it. And we were lucky to kind of move into a good direction and kind of ride the storm out.
What was your original reaction when you started seeing that it wasn't looking as great in April? Was it a woe is me? Was it I need to reassess this? I mean, what was your process?
The first thing was, are my top doggers going to be okay? Because they're all contractors, so there's no legal thing I had to do, but I wanted to make sure they were okay. And so that was my first concern. And of course, I had to think about myself too. Can I pay my bills? And but what I started to do, and it was something I had learned quite a long time ago, was I've learned to keep myself busy and focused. And so what I started doing was doing free webinars to anyone who would listen, to be like, look, I teach change management. I teach being resilient in times of change. Let's pull that out. I have classes on your digital presence. And of course, at the beginning of the pandemic and Zooming, people really had no clue that you should have a light. You don't angle your laptop up your nose, these types of things. So I started doing webinars on that and reaching out to organizations to be like, how can I support what's happening to your people? And that servant leadership mentality absolutely came back in 20-fold. And I didn't do it for that reason. I did it kind of selfishly to keep busy and to keep my brand out there and to see what would happen. Lo and behold, that actually worked quite well.
So kind of again, I guess it goes back to that young child, that young Steve, with kind of positivity.
Yep.
I mean, this is kind of jumping back. I mean, I know your parents were positive at a young age. Are they still kind of your big support? I'm guessing your husband is probably one of your big supports.
I hope so.
Still kind of more involved?
I hope so. No, I mean, I'm still pretty tight with my family. I call my parents all the time. I taught them to Zoom and FaceTime. Okay. So that's been a positive thing. I know my dad's insanely creative. He's a woodworker. Of course, they're both retired. And the very, very beginning of the pandemic, I'm like, Dad, you need to get something to hold your phone because this shakiness and is making me seasick. He's like, all right. So the next couple days later, I FaceTime him, and my dad's like, hold on, and he built this like beautiful stand out of like wood scraps he had in his wood shop. I'm like, damn, Dad, that's pretty good. So and my parents are still a very, very big part of my life. I'm very fortunate that they're I have my parents, because I know many people who don't. But yeah, they're still a great positive influence on me, and also from a work ethic perspective too. I mean, my dad worked in a factory his entire life. My mother was a secretary at elementary school, and they both worked stupidly hard. And I think that rubbed off on all 3 of us kids as far as, a focused work ethic and trying to output that good quality to make a difference for folks.
Well, talking about making a difference and kind of the output, I mean, where do you see yourself, your company being, let's say if we're talking in 5 years from now?
If we're on the same trajectory, we'll be the certified leadership, inclusive leadership vendor for probably about 10 organizations. We just picked up 2 more, which was crazy awesome. I'm so excited. And really just helping people within their organizations be more consciously inclusive leaders. And so it's really thinking about all of the others, quote unquote, and really creating that safe space and that sense of belonging for anyone within the workplace. Because obviously it's not the right thing, not just the right thing to do, at least from my perspective, but you can see all the data, it makes good business sense. And that's one of the things that has been really refreshing when I teach these inclusive leadership programs and things of that nature. You know, I have people who are all over the map in these sessions, and some are like, got it, Steve, I see eye to eye. Yes, I want the world to be more inclusive. Awesome sauce. Then there's the folks who are voluntold to be there, who are just like in the back, like, and you know, they you know have their opinion, and that's totally fine. So what I do is I explain to all of the people, all of y'all in the room, you know, you can be on one side that it makes the world better. On the opposite side, it's, keeps us out of hot water with legal things, depending on where you're at. I said, but right in the middle is it makes your business more successful when you're inclusive. When you're exclusive, you're excluding customers, you're excluding potential employees and all that good stuff. And so if you can be as inclusive as possible, studies show time and again that that's really, really good for the bottom line. When you have a diverse board of directors, when you have a diverse C-suite, yeah, the stock price, the contracts, everything is better. That's been proven. And so I said, if you're not going to be maybe at that, like the world's going to be better, but at least agree that we're going to go down this path because it's going to be good for your business. Is that fair? And they're like, okay, cool. Yes. By the end of the workshops, they're like, yeah, actually it does make the world better and people are more happy. I'm like, yes. So I think, in 10 years from now, that story and that message will be much more common than it already is. And we'll hopefully be the ones sharing that message with folks.
Where, I mean, and talking about kind of, I guess, the future, I mean, it seems at least that things, you have one side going farther right, one side going farther left. What do you think is going to push companies to have that mindset that you're talking about? Do you think, I mean, because I think you bring up a good point. It's like one's being a good person and one's keeping you out of legal troubles right there. Let's find somewhere in between. So, and ideally you want more people being good people.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be mostly legal stuff that's going to push, I think, more companies, or you think it's just going to be?
I absolutely think it's the newer generations entering into the workforce or growing within the workforce that's going to shift things. That is shifting things. And I'm a Gen Xer. We're kind of all over the map with some things, but we were a little bit more embracing of differences because of the time that we grew up. And I think if you, and I am grossly generalizing, and I understand that as a person who teaches diversity, but I do think that in general, the tolerance of any difference is much more embraced by the younger set. I'm gonna say like an old guy, but I think that's what's going to push a lot of businesses. That and the fiscal business case that keeps being shown. Couple that with businesses know that it's smart business sense to be inclusive, and they're more and more starting to leverage their power as a business to help influence society. You see, folks in North Carolina when they were trying to do the anti-trans bathroom bill, and a lot of companies were like, you know what, you do this, yeah, we're going to find other places to go play because we can go there, and it's really making the greater society be like, oh, well, maybe we should try to be like nice to all of the other people out there because it's not just right thing to do, but it's good for the bottom line. And I think those are the combinations that really are going to move things forward as we progress as a society.
Is there any, I mean, to that young you, that young Steve that was kind of trying to find their path in life, their footing in life, is there any advice you would give to that person?
Wear sunscreen would be the first thing. No, I think I think I actually had this, but I still believe it bears repeating. And that's you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen a lot more. But listen to what's being said and also what's not being said. And couple that with trying to be even more empathetic than you are and understand the difference that people have and the different experiences that they go through life with. I know, I'm a white dude, so I have that privilege or that advantage going up. I'm also a gay dude, and I've been gay bashed, and I've had some horrible things happen. So that difference is not foreign to me, and I do believe that my gayness is a superpower because I can empathize with some others. I will not understand what it's truly like to be a person of color in this society, but I can have a lot more empathy having, been called lots of nasty words, even, boy, people are really brave online. I have to say that. And when you throw it out there that you're the gay leadership dude, boy, people come up running to try to knock you down. And it's interesting. So, but that bit of empathy, I think can't be undervalued. And I would tell younger Steve, embrace that and really try to understand people's perspectives.
I mean, I guess two questions I have. I mean, when did you start leaning into the gay leadership dude using that title? Was that more recently, or is that okay?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I figured my authentic self out around 24, pretty much right when I was entering into the workforce. Actually, when I moved down to Orlando that second time as the boomerang and worked for the software company, and I never hid who I was. And as queer people know, you strategically start to share your authentic self with different topics. A lot of it honestly has to do with psychology and safety. You don't want to just like hello and throw it out there and then all of a sudden you're gay bash, or something like that. So you got to be mindful of that. And we all operate from that safety perspective, but we figure it out. And my entire career, I've been out. But it wasn't until I was writing my latest book, Pride Leadership Strategies for the LGBTQ Plus Leader to be the King or Queen of the Jungle, that I came up with the gay leadership dude because my publisher kind of forced me to in a wonderful way. And she's like, well, what's your brand with this book? I said, well, it's TopDog. She said, no, your personal brand. I'm like, I don't think I have one. She's like, you need one because at some point TopDog could be sold, but you will still be here as an author, as a speaker, as someone who does keynotes and all that stuff. I'm like, well, it's a book about queer leadership, so maybe I should be the gay leadership dude. And it's been kind of fun because I often say, by just using the title, 3 things about me immediately. 1, I'm gay. 2, I self-identify as a dude. And 3, I really like leadership. And let's focus our energy on that third point. And I don't have to do the coming out thing. It's kind of right there in the title. And so it does make it pretty easy. And it's actually been kind of fun. Recently, my husband and I were on one of our first vacations since the pandemic, and someone actually came up to me and said, "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but aren't you the gay leadership dude?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm a D- celebrity." so it's sticking somehow, and it's only been since 2019.
And I mean, it brings me to my second question is, so you said having one mouth and 2 ears, kind of listening and kind of hearing what's there and what's not there. Especially meeting, like maybe it's not necessarily in the company because you're probably going to be around those people over time. You're a leader. Being a leader, you can probably get to know them and see kind of what's going to be a positive way of communicating to them in negative ways. But even just having a regular conversation with someone at a coffee shop or a bar, or whatever it might be, is there a quick way of kind of figuring out what it's okay for me to say and what I shouldn't say because it might trigger, or is it just being yourself and allowing kind of things to fly? But if they tell you something, then kind of veer in a different direction. I mean, what's your feedback, thoughts on something like that?
So I'm going to tell you and the listeners the absolute secret, one of the secrets to effective leadership. Okay, ready? It's you ask people about them. And then you just listen, because people, 1, love to tell their story. Fine. That's just how we're wired as humans. But 2, they're going to give you so much data if you let them. And Stephen Covey, if you're not familiar with him, he's a big leadership guru, and he says we often listen to respond versus listen to understand. And I think that's such a fantastic strategy. Most of us, especially in Western society, are listening to find our spot to jump in or to add value or tell about our side of the perspective. Or if you just listen to understand and to really know, you're going to really find a great way, not just to build rapport with that person, but you're going to get a sense of who they are as an individual. And that's the smart strategy if you want to be an effective leader.
Well, thank you, Steve, for being here. If someone's listening right now and they want to be an effective leader, maybe they're not there yet, but they're looking to go that path, go that direction, what's the best way of them following you and also finding more information about TopDog?
Yeah, actually, it's one-stop shop. If you go to topdoglearning.biz, you'll be able to find out about my team, about me, the books we have out there, the online training programs we do, the keynotes, and blah, 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 all that good stuff. So topdoglearning.biz.
Well, thank you again, Steve, for being here. AKA the gay leadership dude, AKA founder of TopDog Learning Group. I mean, AKA probably so much more, but I'll just finish at that. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe, please share. Go find Steve. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
buddy.